Okay.
Gordy.
Okay, let's learn about Somalia, the most fascinating place you'll probably never be able to go to. And it is a fascinating, wonderful place. I'm so very glad I got to see Somalia before it started falling apart. And we'll get to that later. It is a beautiful, wonderful country, just peopled with the most incredible people in the whole world. It's located here on the Horn of Africa. It's right by the equator, and that equator does a lot to determine what Somalia is like. I lived about 100 miles north of the equator. And if you've been on the equator in open skies, you know what it's like to go out at nighttime and to see that magnificent display up above. And it was so bright, I could literally read by starlight. It was just magnificent. Somalia, thousands of years ago, developed trade with the Arab countries, which are right close here. And because it's on the equator, it doesn't have seasons like we have. It has 3 months of wet, 3 months of dry, 3 months of wet, 3 months of dry. I never got used to that. You know, in 2 years, you don't really totally adapt to that. And I think I was always a little bit off kilter. I never knew what month it was. Hardly sometimes know what day it was because of this alternating dry and wet. But that's just how it is located. It also meant that it could have 2 growing seasons each year, which is really fabulous for it. And 2 wet seasons. So when the water holes started getting low, the rainy season hit and it replenished them. And because of that dry, wet, they've been able to develop a very strong nomadic pastoral society. About 70 to 80% of the people are nomads who go from these water holes to water holes to water holes. And how did I end up in Somalia? Well, it's pretty much all this guy's fault or someone like him. Back in 1967, sometime in the spring, I got this letter from Peace Corps saying, hey, would you like to go to Somalia? And my reaction was, what? So I ran down to the library. Of course, we had no internets and no cell phones back then. And in the library, there wasn't a solitary book on Somalia, of course, but there was an encyclopedia. And I probably looked in something like the Encyclopedia Britannica, and there was this 1-column description of Somalia. And I thought, oh my, here's the exotic place that I wanted to go to. So I said, yes, I would definitely go. So that's how I ended up in it. So I blame it all on this guy. There was one picture, and there was a picture like this guy, but in black and white. So it's all his fault. Somalia has a history that is absolutely astounding. It's a land of many peoples, a land of many cultures. Back in pre-European days, you can see where all of the tribes were. Each different color is a different tribe of Somali. They all consider themselves Somalis, no matter where they fit on here. And this red line that you see, whoops, got a little rambunctious there, is how Europeans later defined Somalia. The United Nations put in protectorates for Somalia after World War II. The Europeans decided that Somalia wasn't capable of managing itself. And goodness knows they weren't enemies. There was no reason to disrupt them. But the Allies did that instead. The United Nations did. And they put in some protectorates. They put in a French protectorate up here at the top called Djibouti. They put in a British protectorate in northern Somalia, and they put in the Italian protectorate in southern. I actually live down here in this bright yellow section in the Italian part of the country. During this time that they were under the protectorates, they were supposed to be trained to be a real country. And among that, the things they did was develop their own flag. You'll see that it is a 5-pointed star. Their goal, their thought with the 5-pointed star was to bring the 5 sections of Somalia back together again. They wanted to bring in Djibouti. Let's go back a little and see that. Bring in Djibouti, which is way up here, that's 1. Northern Somalia, was 2, southern Somalia was 3, and then they had these sections that were in Ethiopia, that's 4, and down here in Kenya, that's 5. And their stated goal was to bring these 5 sections together. In 1960, they gained their independence virtually at the same time from the protectorates. The southern portion and the northern portion came together to form Somalia. They invited the French portion, Djibouti, to join them, but Djibouti declined and became its own country. And truthfully, it's been the most prosperous and stable of the sections of Somalia. So they had 2 of the points of the star together. When I left in 1969, the country was on the absolute verge of turmoil. 2-3 months after I left, the president, who was a good guy, had been reelected, and then he was almost immediately assassinated. And that brought on civil wars and revolutions and just decimated the country. And along with that came all kinds of droughts and horrendous life for Somalis. But you can see that no matter what has developed, like up here, Somaliland broke off, they kept that little 5-pointed star. Down here was the original Somalia, they have the 5-pointed star. Down in the south was the next break off, and Al-Shabaab came in there. And they too, oddly, have the 5-pointed star. And they called this area Jubaland. And up way in the corner, they have Puntland. And that too has kept the 5-pointed star. Sadly, the country has not been able to bring these 5 points together. But there's a feeling amongst Somalis. They are Somalis, no matter where they are. They consider themselves Somalis. And they've been Somalis for a very long time. Since we can't go into Somalia itself, we have virtually no diplomatic relations with them now, no consulate, no embassy, hardly any communication. We'll take a virtual journey. And I think we'll start our virtual journey up in the Valley of the Kings. And in the Valley of the Kings, there's this magnificent temple that was built by Queen, I'm going to mispronounce it, Hatshepsut. She ruled about 1400 BC. She was not a queen because she was married to a pharaoh. She was a pharaoh in her own right. We don't hear very much about her because she wasn't a conqueror. She was an explorer. She heard about these people down in the land of Punt who were really good people, and they had all these wonderful things that she could trade with. Well, she decided to send her ships down to this mystical land of Punt. And when they got there, when her ships got there, they found an open-armed people who shared their livestock, their fruits, their incredible crops, everything they shared with the people on these ships. And they took these all back to Egypt. And even some people from Somalia went back to Egypt, to the queen's castle, her temple. And she was so impressed with what they had done and who they were, that on her tomb, she had the story told about this journey. And somewhere in those hieroglyphics, she called them the kindest and most generous people I have ever met. And I can attest to that. They are incredibly kind and generous people. It's one of the hallmarks of their society. If you show up in their house and they don't even know you, they will share what they have with you. If you come before they've eaten dinner and they only have meals for one person, if you're a guest, you will get that meal. If they have only one bed, you will get that bed. They are wonderfully kind and generous people. I was just amazingly impressed. I understand why the Queen was indeed so impressed with them. Somalis had actually been trading for quite some time. I'm sure you've heard of the ancient Silk Road. And I remember in school, we had this picture of Asia and Europe and this red line drawn across, and they called it the Silk Road, and that's where Marco Polo went. Well, actually, the Silk Road was a lot more than that. It was a lot of interconnected roads all over, and it went from China all the way across Asia into Europe and down into the Arab countries. Somalia was included in that over the sea route. And Somalia had no doubt been trading with India and South Asia and even over to China for thousands of years before Queen Hetsepet even knew of them. That's probably how she heard about them. They were recognized throughout the world as having unique and amazing things that they could give the world. One of the most unique and most precious was the frankincense and myrrh that they grew in northern Somalia. Now, I could have these pictures mixed up. I got so many contradictory information on which one was frankincense and which one was myrrh, but one is one and the other is the other. Frankincense and myrrh grow in northern Somalia, one of the very few places in the whole world that they grow. They just happen to have the right temperature, the right soil, and it grows there, and it is valued. You see that vial of myrrh there? Incredibly valuable. Frankincense and myrrh were used in religious ceremonies all throughout Asia and China, just everywhere. Arabs used it. It was very, very valuable. And if the terms frankincense and myrrh sound familiar to you, it may be because of the story of the Christ child. And odds are pretty good that the frankincense and myrrh that the wise men brought came from Somalia. You can see almost a direct route here going up. They could have come in there. It could have come in here. It could have come in over here and hooked into the Middle East. There are a number of different ways it could have come through, but there were definitely trade routes right in here, and that's where the frankincense and myrrh is grown. So that was Somalia's contribution to the Christ child story. If you should ever go to Somalia itself, you must see the cave paintings in northern Somalia. They're brilliant paintings like you've never seen before. There are 6 sites in northern Somalia that have these cave paintings. Here's one of them. The site itself was named the watering place for camels, and it was in existence around 9,000 to 3,000 BC. And just look at the clarity of those paintings. Here's some more from that same site. Can't remember the name of this animal that has the stripes on it, but it was there then. Here's some cows that they had. Here's from a site nearby. Whoops, and they have sheep and goats. And here's a hunter with his dogs. And you can see the hunter. I'm not sure if this is a bow and arrow that he's pulling back or if it's a spear that he's getting ready to throw. It's absolutely beautiful. And if you should see these, you will likely be one of the few people, let's put it that way, the few people in the whole world that will have seen these cave paintings. They're just not widely known, but there are 6 sites that you can go see in northern Somalia. And while we're in northern Somalia, let's go see Arawello's grave. I have never seen Arawello's grave, and I would venture to say that there isn't a white person in existence who has seen Arawello's grave. Arawello really existed. She was a real woman. And in the 1st century, when Somalia was in turmoil, she formed an army of women and brought peace to the country and prosperity to the country. Her grave is still there. It's near the site where she built a fort to train her women. Men and women, Somalis, do go there. When men go there, they throw stones at it and say she never existed. When women go there, they put little bits of bright, cheery cloth and pretty little flowers around her grave. I can guarantee this is not a picture of her grave. I don't know that there ever has been a picture of her grave, but I've read so many reports about the existence of that grave that I do know it's there. In the book that I wrote, The Mystical Land of Myrrh, I put in the full story of Arruelo, and this is an artist's interpretation of who she was. And you can tell that she's the goddess because of the golden snake around her arm. And if you ever should go there, please take 1,000 pictures and send them to me. I would love to see the real grave of Arruelo. But if you do get to this part of Somalia, you'll have to be a woman in order to see this. I'm sure they would never take a white man there. And you'll have to ask very nicely and find a woman who likes you, a Somali woman. And then she can show you where the grave is. Oh, it would be such a wonderful adventure. And while we're in the mountains in northern Somalia, let's take a look at some of the flowers they've got. They, of course, have aloe all over because of the desert conditions. The proteus on the right is their state flower. The coloring of this orange, that can change into a lot of different colors. It can be yellow or red, and I think it even goes into the blues and purples. Somalia actually has a lot of flowers. Now, you won't see a field of flowers. Like when our deserts go into bloom, you get just this massive field of beautiful flowers. You won't see that. What you will see is going up to individual bushes, like these bushes, and finding the flowers on there, or going along the riverbanks and finding flowers bloom there, or perhaps in the mountains. And it'll be like a treasure when you find them. They're just beautiful. And birds, of course, they have wonderful birds. Little pygmy falcon is so cute, and the lilac-breasted roller. Again, you won't see huge flocks of them, but they are there, and they're just a treasure when you find them. I love that guinea fowl. Isn't it wonderful? And ostriches, of course. I never saw an ostrich, but I know that they are indeed there. And birds, oh, the red and yellow barbet, and the yellow-billed hornbill, and the little Somali bee eater. I just think they're cute. And butterflies. Somalia was good enough to do a whole series of stamps with butterfly pictures. And this is that series. And they are beautiful butterflies. Now, a number of these I did see. They do go from bush to bush to bush, just like butterflies are supposed to do, pollinating them. And they are all over Somalia. Yeah, not in massive numbers, but indeed they are all over. And while we're up in the north, let's go take a look at the bush life. It's always a fun. That's Somalia bush. Not a whole lot there. A few bushes hither and yon. And here is a village. There is a village because there is water. Somewhere right near this village or in this village is a decent water hole. And we know that because of the green. You can almost see the borderline where the green stops. Villages can only be as big as the water that supports them. If the water won't support them, they can't be there. So we know that this is a decent sized little village, but it is a little village. As the nomads go through, they will find these villages and they will use the water that is in those villages. The villagers know it and the villagers welcome them. They find out news from other sections and talk with them. And at night they'll sit around and tell stories. It's really quite an adventuresome life. Somalis don't read. They have no written language. People are tempted to call them illiterate. They're not illiterate. They just have a different kind of literacy than we do. Their literacy is an oral literacy. They can sit at a bonfire at night and tell a 2-hour story, word for word, as they heard it. It's a very different story, different kind of literacy than what we know, and it is beautiful. And they carry these stories from village to village. They hear new ones and take the new stories to the next villages that they go see. And the camels are the other important part of their culture. The water is one part, the camels are another. There are probably, I'd say, an average of maybe 20 or 30 camels in a herd. They're very well taken care of. Here you can see that they're herding them. They don't want to lose any single camel, and a camel can run faster than a human. So they tie them together to make sure they don't lose any of their camels. You've probably heard that camels drink water and store it in their humps. Well, yes, that's true. But in this type of bush country, they have another talent that's far more important. They eat the thorn bushes that are out there. Camels have 4 stomachs, and they can take those thorns and put them through the 4 stomachs. And when they're finished, they have milk, precious milk that the nomads simply could not have any other way. And that milk nourishes people and children and the baby camels and perhaps even some of the goats or sheep that they might have along with them. Incredibly important to them are their camels. Camels are not ridden. They are beasts of burden. This is a drawing about it. You'll see, I never saw a camel that was this neat. And this is basically what they do. They put the ribs for their home up there. They put their water and milk baskets up there. And this is what one of the nomad huts look like. They put the ribs up and then they put everything over it, all of the cloth and hides and everything that they've got. You'll notice that this nomad is walking barefoot. That's very common. Even though it's thorn country, their feet become accustomed to walking barefoot, and most of them do. If they're particularly wealthy, they might have a pair of leather sandals that they will wear in a town. But out in the bush, odds are they will be no shoes. Here's some women in a convoy. That's their typical dress. They tie the cloth over one shoulder and wrap it around them. Most of them will sort of cover their hair, but they're not fanatical about it like they are now. Here's some children out in the nomads. We know that they are nomads because of that house that we're seeing. And here's the little girl whose face launched 1,000 camels. Isn't she adorable? I just love her. There is a bride price for women when they get married. Camels are among that price, as are goats and sheep. And young women who are very pretty, of course, and very industrious to get a good bride price. And I think she will. The middle picture is a picture that one of my students drew. You'll note in this picture, I put this in for one particular reason. Here he drew this thing on the nomad's wrist, and look down here. Here's that thing on the nomad's wrist. Here's a different kind of nomad, and either that thing is below their wrapping or down on the ground for the picture, but it's there, I assure you. It's a pillow that these particular nomads use, the ones with the big bushy hairdos. They don't want to mess up their hairdos because it took too long to get them that way. So they have these pillows. This is what a pillow looks like. They're wood, they're carved, they're very well cared for. It's a strong wood. And if you know Abdi, my friend Abdi, who's from Somalia, he's a coach here at the middle school and sometimes at the high school. We were comparing things that we had from Somalia. He has one of these headrests too, one of these pillows, and they are absolutely identical. I couldn't get a good picture of the side carvings, but it's like one of those eternity designs that's very intricate. And our 2 pillows were absolutely identical. I don't know if that's true throughout Somalia or if it's just true in the area that we were in, because he lived in the area that I was in as well. They also take their sheep and their goats with them. I know when I was doing research for the book that I wrote, I found reference to sheep herders and goat herders being sheep herders and goat herders were men. My friend Abdi was a goat herder when he was younger. He didn't want to spend his life being a goat herder. So his brother sent him to school so that he could become something different than a goat herder. But don't diminish the value of what these goat herders are doing. The goats were every much a bit of the property of a family as the camels. Somalis didn't judge their wealth by how much money they had, nor did they necessarily judge it by how many camels or goats or sheep they had. They judged their wealth by how much they have to share with others. When these dry seasons come, and they used to come every decade or so, those who had enough to share were the ones who were considered wealthy, regardless of how many that was that they had. It's really quite a unique story. Also, these sheep didn't graze in just one area. The sheep herders had to take them out into the bush, where they stayed for days or weeks at a time. You'll notice the vegetation isn't all that prolific, so they have to take them out where there's enough for them to eat. And Abdi shared a story with me that he heard when he was a sheep herder about the stalker in the sky. He said, in this story, there are 3 calves up in the sky. There are also 3 cows and a shepherd who takes care of them. There's also a hyena up in the sky. And every night, the hyena gets closer and closer and closer to the calves and the cows. And the shepherds crawl down under their blankets to protect themselves. That's not just a story. It's really true. There are hyena out there, and there are a lot of other things out there that are challenges to anyone in the bush. There are cheetahs, beautiful creatures, but very, very dangerous for sheep and goats. There's the Gerenuk, beautiful creature. And the Somali ostrich. There's the little dik-dik. This little dik-dik is about, no more than 2 feet tall. And when it jumps like a grasshopper, just up and down and up and down. They're beautiful little creatures. Here's the kudu. And you see this wonderful, 2 of the great horns of the kudu. These are captured and used as shofar in the Jewish ceremony for New Year. And there are lions, the libah. And you won't see them much, but I did see footprints of libah more than once. They are there, and they're very dangerous. And one day, this little guy on the right, little libah, one day I was at home alone, and someone came knocking on the door. And I opened it, and it was this little peddler. He had a basket of little goodies, all kinds of carvings that he had. And among his carvings was this little creature. And I asked him what it was, and he said, libah. Well, libah can be either lion or shark. And I looked at this little creature, thought, oh my goodness, there's his mane, of course, but that body looks like a shark. It's like he combined both of them into one entity. And I just fell in love with this. And I, of course, immediately bought it from him. My only regret is that I didn't just buy his whole basket of things, whatever they were, as it's the only time I saw anyone like that with any type of hand carved things. And it was a treat. I still have this little libah in my glass case. He's a wonderful little creature. Okay, while we're out traveling around, this is what the houses look like in these little villages. The one on the left is more likely northern Somalia. They tend to do the brightly colored one. The one on the right is more likely southern Somalia. They do these little round huts with the thatched top. That's very, very common. You'll see them all over southern Somalia. This is one of these square houses being built. You can see up here how they put the posts on, and then they put a kind of mud on top of that. And here is the finished house over here. This was taken from a project in a town called Jilib, which is a smallish town. At every water hole in every village, there are women who have to bring the water to the houses. And it is the women and girls who do it. Men don't carry the water in these villages for the most part, unless there's just no woman around. It is the women who do that. That's their job. They don't go with the sheep and goats. They stay home and carry the water. I wanted to show you a few of the different peoples and cultures that are in Somalia. There are so many fascinating ones. 2 of the girls, the one on the left is likely a country girl because of the clothes she's wearing. The one on the right is likely a city girl. but both lovely, lovely ladies. Two sets of friends. I don't know this custom on the left with the red splotch on top of their heads. My guess, and it is a guess, I'm not sure, is that these two girls are eligible to be married, and they've put the blotch on their head to show that they have been through the clitorectomy ceremony.
Oh,
This is done to
oh,
every girl in Somalia.
oh, God.
Yeah, would you please mute yourself? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is a reaction. Very valid reaction. I want to emphasize this is not just a Somali custom. This is not a Muslim custom. This is an African custom. It goes back thousands and thousands of years, so far back that no one's been able to trace it. And it's done all over Africa. The imams in the Muslim religion have tried to stop it. People from the outside, like our missionaries, have tried to stop it. We can't seem to stop it. It's so ingrained in their culture that it's just there. Sadly, many
Even today, you were there in the late 60s, even today?
even today, it is still there. When you read the books from more modern Somali girls, they will talk about it and tell you about their experience and their friends' experience, but it is still there. Now, those who have migrated out of the country, and there are lots who have migrated, may not have been subjected to it. But the ones who do still live in the country predominantly have. It's really, really tragic. I would say the girls on the right are of the same age, but they don't have the same custom. And the girls on the right are more like the girls in my area. They would dress like that. Okay, the boys in bush country, happy boys, cheerful. You might run across, if you're very lucky, a shaman. Shamans are itinerant shamans. They go from village to village. They carry nothing with them but the tools of their trade. They don't carry any food or any sleeping bags or anything. Wherever they go, they are welcomed like royalty. They come in and they perform marriage ceremonies. They do death services, baptismal type services, welcoming a child to the world. But they go from village to village. Most villages cannot afford to have a permanent religious person there, but these little Iman people serve the purpose of going from village to village. And on the right, you'll see a group of young boys at Quranic school. Every village that can afford it, or every town that can afford it, hires an imam to teach boys, young boys about this age, the Quran. And teaching them the Quran means that they get these boards that are here and they memorize these boards. I don't know how many days they spend on this particular board, but when they finish that board, they go to the next and the next and the next. And the learning consists primarily of simply memorizing what's on the board and being able to speak it. And in this sense, these children do become very literate in Arabic because they do need to read Arabic. Okay, as we travel down Somalia, we come to another very unique aspect of Somali culture, and it's the meerschaum. They've been exporting meerschaum for centuries, millennia. This, again, is one of the very few places in the whole world where meerschaum can be found. These meerschaum pipes that they made are not used in Somalia. Somalis don't smoke pipes. These are created for other countries, probably European countries, and they are highly valued. They're considered, the Rolls Royce of the pipe world. Somalis do use these incense burners down here. Behind the incense burners is probably a little bit of frankincense and myrrh. And what they do is they put a hot coal into the incense burner, then sprinkle a few little grains of frankincense or myrrh into the incense burner, and it fills the house. It doesn't take much at all to fill a house full of incense and myrrh. Frankincense and myrrh, excuse me. Okay, the other important part. Oh, here we go, city life in Somalia. I think we skipped a slide there. City life is a bit different than country life, although just as fascinating in many ways. This is Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. It is stark white. It has little decorative elements from the Arabs. You can see some up here along the rooftops. These are little decorative elements along this building back here. Inside here is a little beach, not very wide. When I visited Mogadishu, I very often went down to that little beach, particularly early in the morning, and I'd sit and watch the sun come up. And it was magical. The sun would start to rise in the east. This is the Indian Ocean we're looking at. And it would fill the sky with this great, huge crystal. You can really understand why Mogadishu was called the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. Not only the white buildings, but this whole panorama of the feeling of crystal, of a pearl. It was just beautiful, soothing, inspiring, dramatic. If you ever go to Mogadishu, go to the ocean early in the morning and watch the sunrise. You'll be speechless at the effect that it has on you. This is downtown Mogadishu. On the left, you'll see what is probably a postcard. And whoever did this postcard wanted to pretty up with some color. It doesn't have color. Mogadishu is white, like the rest of the pictures we saw. But here too, you see the Arab influence, and you'll see a mosque. There are a lot of mosques in Mogadishu because there are a lot of people in Mogadishu. This is what one of them looks like. It's right on the Indian Ocean, and it's a beautiful mosque. One of the very few places where you will see some color is in the decoration of their mosques. I also included the picture of the woman with the big tall door. You won't see tall doors anywhere else in Somalia, just in Mogadishu. And again, it's reminiscent of the Arab influence because Arabs tend to have these big, tall doors. That's something that's left there. You will also see donkeys everywhere. It doesn't have a water system. No municipal water system like we've got. They go out to wells where water is, and they fill up these cans with water and take them out to different houses and buildings. And it's tedious, but that's what they do. Even in Baidoa, where I lived, we didn't have running water. We had a donkey, a nice little man who brought his donkey with these gallon cans of water, 5-gallon cans of water out there every morning, put a ladder up against our house, climbed up the house, and dumped those into a big barrel that sat on our roof. And that's how we got our indoor water. That's how they deliver water. There's a couple of hotels in Mogadishu. If you go to them, you will have running water, but it is salty water. It comes from the ocean. I'm sure it has to. It's just too salty. So it's undrinkable. And if you try to take a shower in it, your skin gets very dried and scratchy. There are, of course, markets in Mogadishu, lots of markets, again, because it's a big town. Men and women both go to markets, and as do children. I'm sure you've seen these markets like these in almost any country that you've been in. They're very common, and they carry everything. They're open every day except Friday, which is the religious day. In the markets, there are these weavers. The weavers fascinated me. We actually had a Peace Corps volunteer who worked with the weavers, trying to get the cloth into European countries. These particular weavers that we have the picture of are making very thin border-like things that they put on the edges of the white muslin that a lot of people wear. Elsewhere, there are weavers that weave whiter cloth, and these are two pieces that I brought back. The weavers weave, oopsie. There we go. The weavers weave stripes and plaids. No flowers, no butterflies, nothing like that. Stripes and plaids. That's what they weave. And you can get a heavily woven one like the blue one, or a very light gossamer like the red and black one. They're hard to use because they are homemade. They're personally made. So the stripes don't always match up and the plaids don't always match up. So they're difficult to work with. But Eugene, one of my cohorts, was working very hard to find designers who would work with them and be able to use individual bolts like this. They weren't bolts like we know them. They were perhaps 6 to 8 feet long, and help them develop a market in the West. And if you walk a little way around the street and down an alley, you'll find the Gold Alley that the Arab merchants set up when they began coming to Somalia, which was, a couple thousand years ago anyhow. You'll find 6, 8, maybe 10 little shops, each one about 200 to 300 square feet. These are little shops. Each one has one gold merchant in it. I don't know where the gold comes from, but they all have it. And when they work with it, they heat the gold over a fire and pull it out into a strand about as thin as a spider's web. And then they weave it into these very intricate designs. And they make bracelets, necklaces, earrings. They make larger pieces for a home, perhaps a serving tray. And everything is sold by weight. So if you buy a little piece, it doesn't cost very much, but if you buy a serving tray, it will cost more. Doesn't matter how intricate the design is, it's all sold by weight. And I brought back a number of these earrings for family and friends, and they are just incredibly popular. They just love them. I have a couple pair I still have for myself. They're very similar to the ones that I have on today, but these are not the Somali ones that I have on today. The original gold ones are just a treasure, truly a treasure. Okay, we will next go to my Baidoa. I think I've got time for a break. Maria, what do you think?
Okay, well, let me give you some questions that have been appearing in the chat.
Okay.
You mentioned that they need to learn how to read Arabic, but that there's no Somali, there's no written language. So when you said no written language, that means no Somali written language?
Correct.
Okay. And then early on, you kept saying about how, and you showed us that first map that showed all of what the Somalis think of as Somalia,
Right.
which was not included in the UN Protectorate, et cetera. What is it that makes them feel like Somalis as opposed to some other African area?
That's a complicated issue. Basically, it's their culture. Their culture is just different than other parts of Africa. I remember too, when I was in training, there was a mention, just one mention, that Somalis captured other tribes and took them into slavery. It's like Somalis know who they are and what they did, and other countries didn't. There's this cohesiveness. They're nomads. They speak similar languages. I will say that there are 5 different distinct languages within the Somali group, but they all spoke all of them and knew what they were. It's a cultural thing. They're family oriented. If they're part of a particular family, they will always be part of that particular family. You saw all those little tribes. They very strongly identified as part of that tribe, and that tribe identified as Somali. I don't know how to describe it any more than that. It's like, gosh, how do you know that you're a Minnesotan?
Okay. And someone asked whether meerschaum is a stone. Did I
It's
say
a
that
very,
right? Meerschaum?
yeah, it's a soft stone, the very soft stone that they can carve in.
Okay. And is myrrh the same thing as gum Arabic?
Don't know. I don't know what gum Arabic is, so I couldn't answer that.
All right. And when you were traveling around, how did you get from area to area? On camel?
We'll get to that in the second part, mostly by lorry. I didn't do a whole lot of travel in the north. The roads just were not up to it. Most of the pictures you saw came from friends that I have in the Peace Corps. And we have this big listserv group, and I sent out this call, hey guys, I need some pictures. And they sent me hundreds of pictures. And the ones from the north are mostly from them. I didn't take virtually any of those at all. I just wasn't in the north.
Okay. Someone just put it into the chat. I think Arabic is from acacia trees. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a break as you suggested, and let's all get back at 2 o'clock. So
Okay,
that'll be just another, that'll be about 8 minutes, okay, by my watch anyway.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. I don't know if you want to chance stopping the recording, Mary Ann.
Yeah, I'm looking for the
What do
little
you
stop
recommend?
button. Pause recording. Here we go. Okay, we've come down Somalia now into Mogadishu, which is in here. Now we need to get to Baidoa, which is where I was. And that's where I spent most of my 2 years. This is a road I knew well. This is the road to Baidoa. From Mogadishu to Baidoa. It's about 175 miles. The best time we made on it was about 3.5 hours. And I remember one trip that took over 18 hours. We just kept hitting all kinds of potholes and mud holes, just horrendous. And it's a very clay type soil. So when you get stuck in that, you really get stuck. About 6 months of the year too, it's absolutely impassable. No matter which side of the road you're on, if the big rains hit, don't even try it. It's hopeless. So we spent a good deal of time being absolutely, I don't want to say stranded in Baidoa, but we really had no way out. We had a little airstrip, but the airstrip was all this mud too. There was no way that a plane could get in to get us out. And that was our road. When I did travel, this was a big way of traveling. The Mogadishu Express, I called it. Lorries was what they called it. If you wanted to travel either from Baidoa to Mogadishu or Mogadishu to Baidoa or any of the other towns around, you go into the gathering place for lorries. And there you would find these lorries all loaded up and ready to go somewhere. I would say 99.9% of the time, if I took a lorry, I was mercifully offered a seat up front by the driver. And that was, no, truly the best seat in the house. They were very, very kind with that. If I could, I looked for one of these little 10-seater vans, and those flew back and forth as well. And those were the most comfortable ride. And I got those, probably half the time. And the other half of the time, I pretty much rode in the front seat of a lorry. A little bit bumpy, but it did the job. Halfway in between Mogadishu and Baidoa is this little mountain called Bur Hakaba. Story has it that an evil wizard lived on this mountain. And the story that was developed because they couldn't have women going up into this mountain. In this mountain somewhere, and it might be in this little indentation that we see here, there was a good indentation that filled up with water during the rains. And during the rainy season, people were okay with getting water down below. But during the dry season, they pulled water from this little well, this little reservoir that they had, and used it for the village. If women got up there and touched that water, it would become impure, especially if the women were in their menstrual period. It would be absolutely forbidden. And if that happened, the village would have no water and everyone would have to leave or die, literally. So Bur Hakaba and its wizard. All along the way, you'd see little huts like this, some by themselves, some with others, just in the bush. When you pulled into Baidoa, whether it was your 3-hour trip or your 18-hour trip, you'd see these little shops all along the side. Here they are. These little shops varied from about 200 square feet to maybe 600 or 700 square feet for the biggest. There weren't very many big ones. There was one road that came into Baidoa. Then there was one road that went to the left and one road that went to the right. And this obelisk that you see at the center was actually the very center of town. If we went off, whoopsie, to the left, we'd see the mosque. This was one of the big treasures of Baidoa, was its mosque. Very few towns had a mosque. They're expensive to build, and you have to have an imam there to take care of it. And an imam who will come up 5 times every day through his bullhorn, calling out for everyone to come to prayer. But we had a mosque, and people were very proud of it. Only men went to the mosque, not women. Also, during my second year there, they built this pink building. And this pink building is the new hotel. The hotel, I understand, had about 10 rooms and real potties. For the most part, throughout Somalia, it's squat potty land. You had long drops and you had short drops. Mercifully, our landlord, Omar Chicago, bless his heart, he brought in a real American-style potty for us at our house. So we got to use a real potty. But all throughout the rest of the interior, it was squat potty land. There's our marketplace. Like most marketplaces, you'll see we also had a little weavers league there. These guys operated kind of like an artisans league. They bunched together in the marketplace and worked together. Women were vendors here. Women were not vendors in the shops. Those were all men. If women wanted to sell anything, they could set up shop in the open market. And a lot of them did. I included these pictures just to show you what officials look like. Not a whole lot different than other people. On the left is a top government official in Jilib and his wife, and you can see that she's wearing what is probably an American-style dress and with the shawl over it. Down in the right-hand corner is the regional governor in Baidoa. This picture always struck me because she's in pink. Somalis don't wear pink. Somalis wear blues and yellows and reds and greens and all the bright, wonderful colors of the world. They don't wear pastels. She also has her daughter in what appears to be a little blue outfit. Whoopsie. And again, that's just not normal. It's not customary for Somalia, let's put it that way. I have a suspicion that they were trying so hard to look modern that she wore some pastels. She's the only person I ever saw in Baidoa who wore pastels. And I will say that this regional governor is very, very kind. He and his wife had us over for dinner. They looked out for us. They took care of us. They were really wonderful people. And you'll see behind them the bougainvillea that just burst out through Baidoa and a whole lot of the Upper Juba region, which is what this region was called. That bougainvillea was wonderful. That's our water hole. You will see it, it's in sections. This section is the section for the donkeys. There's another section where the women wash their clothes. There's another section where the boys go swimming. There's just a whole bunch of different sections here. It's not a well, it's actually a spring that just springs up from underneath the ground. When the well goes dry, it doesn't do them any good at all to try to dig down any deeper. The water's not there. It has to come up naturally from below the ground somewhere. And that's how they get the springs. And when this dire drought hit a few years ago, even this spring just absolutely evaporated. There was no more water. Baidoa was established because of these springs. Isha Baidoa, which was the former name of the town, means wells of the people or waters of the people. It is the largest water source in the entire region. And there's our Catholic Church. bless its heart. If we go down the street past the government buildings, we find the Catholic Church. This surprised me. I wasn't expecting a Catholic church in the middle of Somalia. Padre Vittorio lived there. He lived with his brother, the brother of the Catholic Church, 5 nuns, and another young man who was something like a Peace Corps volunteer. And he worked at the Catholic Church as well. The Catholic Church was established by the Italians after World War II. This one was just for boys, and they built another one along the coast just for girls. As you can imagine, after the Italian occupation, there were a lot of half-breed children. These half-breed children were unwelcome in the Somali society. The Somalis didn't want to know that they existed. They typically were outcasts, beggars, crawling in the gutter for food, no clothes. They were really destitute. Padre Vittorio, bless his heart, went out and got some of these children and brought them to this orphanage that the Italians had built. The same thing happened to the girls. The padre there went out and got some of the girls who were half-breed orphans and took them to that college. Couldn't accommodate all of them. I think he has around 50 or 60 there, but he did take care of those. And one day, right after we arrived, no more than a week or two after we were there, I heard a knock on my door. And there was Padre Vittorio. He introduced himself, and he was with a policeman. Padre Vittorio did not speak English, but the policeman did. And the policeman spoke Italian and Somali and English. So the policeman translated for him. Padre Vittorio begged us, absolutely begged us, to please come teach his boys English. He said, without English, they have no future. They will still be outcasts no matter where they go or what they do. But with English, they can become translators. They can become teachers. They can become government workers. They can have a future. Honestly, I had planned on having girls' classes in the afternoons because that was my interest. But the padre was so sincere that I told him, okay, yes, I would teach his boys in the afternoon. So every afternoon I went down and I taught his boys English. And oh, they were wonderful students. I've never had students like that. The Somali boys in the regular school were enthusiastic and dedicated. But these little orphan boys were just, they stole my heart, absolutely. I just loved them. Oh, there's Padre Vittorio with some of his boys. And on the right, you'll see the imam. Padre Vittorio insisted that an imam come in every morning and teach his boys Quran. He didn't want rumors getting out that they were only learning English stuff and Italian stuff. He wanted them to learn the Quran as well as learn the Bible. So every morning the teacher was there to teach them Quran. And I came in the afternoon and taught them English. He was very protective over his boys. This is a couple. I told you that men and women don't walk together. Well, this isn't really quite together, although it looks like it in this photo. I know it's a terrible picture, but I did want to share this with you. The man is on the right. He's walking several paces ahead of the woman on the left. Every morning I saw him, both of them, the couple, walk out toward the outskirts into the bush. Every late afternoon I saw them walking back in, and she carried their findings. That's something like bracken that she's carrying. It's twigs of wood and different small pieces of wood. My guess is that they had a delivery route. They delivered these two or perhaps sold them in the market the next morning early. At any rate, she was always the one who carried the stuff, and he was the one who walked with his walking stick back to the village. Oh, and here's Omar Chicago's family. Omar Chicago was our landlord. Chicago is an odd nickname for a Somali, but he earned it certainly. Several years prior to our arrival, he had gone with a group of, I think, around 15 Somalis to America to learn about agriculture. While he was there, they went to Chicago. He decided to go out and see the gangsters in Chicago one day. Well, he got lost. He didn't know where he was. He had to call in on a payphone to this emergency phone number they had given him. And the person on the other said, "Omar, where are you?" And Omar said, "Well, I'm in Chicago." He said, "Omar, where in Chicago?" He said, "I don't know, I'm in Chicago." Well, finally, a very kind lady came by and interrupted the conversation and gave them directions so that someone could come and rescue Omar. But ever after that, Omar was called Omar Chicago. Everybody had a nickname, and that was his nickname. He was proud as punch of it. And this little girl, the one in the background, her name is Miriam. Whoopsie, there's a very good reason her name is Miriam. She was born shortly after we arrived, and for 6 weeks, I believe it is, mother and child were sequestered in their house. When 6 weeks had passed, Omar knocked on our door and said, "Would you please come out and join our celebration?" Maureen, my cohort, and I decided, oh, yes, we would love to. And out in our courtyard, which was right in front, were probably 30 or 40 people, 50, bunches. They just kept coming. This was Omar's family, his extended family. Now, you can have up to 3 wives in a Muslim land, and I think Omar probably more than this one. But they kept coming. He introduced cousins and nephews and brothers and in-laws and all kinds of people, and they had this huge celebration. Maureen and I were both named Miriam because they didn't have a Somali name for Marianne or Maureen. And when the time came to name this little baby girl, Omar brought him over to us and asked us to hold him while he gave the name to the child. And this was the greatest honor I think I have ever had. Maureen asked if I would hold the little baby, and I held the baby while he blessed her and gave her a name. And he asked me to give a blessing to her as well, which I did. And it just, it so touched me. And everyone in the whole group got to hold the baby and give her a blessing. And when everyone had given the little girl a blessing, they took her back to her mother, who went back into the little house, and we all had a celebration. They had roasted a goat over a fire pit and bunches of rice and mangoes and bananas. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. Now, always remember little Miriam. And she was named Miriam, Omar told us, after Maureen and myself. So we shared a little girl. This was the view outside Omar's place. We didn't have next door neighbors. We were out of town, sort of by ourselves. In many respects, I wish we had been in town where we could have seen more, but we were honestly safer there, and we were at a place where Omar Chicago could really watch us and take care of us, which he did, truly. He was a wonderful landlord, a wonderful friend. He made sure nothing ever happened to us. I remember there was one night when Maureen woke up screaming in the middle of the night, and flashlights were going all over the whole room. It frightened me too. And our door, which did not have a lock, immediately came through with Omar's son and Omar short behind him. They decided that they would have to protect us from intruders. These were Somali men outside our window who wanted to see what we looked like when we slept. Omar promised us that the very next day he would build a fence that would keep them out. Well, we, of course, were expecting a fence like this one, the rock one. Well, that's not what we got. The fence that Omar built consisted of thorn bushes rolled up into probably 6 or 7 foot high bundles and mushed together all around the property. And it's something that no one could get through, just could not. And that was our fence, and son of a gun, we were protected the rest of the time there. And then to make doubly sure that we were protected, Omar always put one of his sons at our front door. Always, day and night, 24 hours, someone was there watching us. I'm not sure that all that watching was necessary, but I am very, very glad that he did it. It just made us feel so much more secure. Some boys in the rains. It rained during the rainy season. It rained in the afternoon, not in the morning. Mornings didn't rain, but afternoons rained. It poured rain, just buckets. And like all kids, they liked the rain. The pomp and circumstance. Oh my goodness, Somalis love pomp and circumstance. Let's see a little bit of it. One of the big traditions in Somalia is going to the tea house. Now, this is not my tea house. I don't have a picture of my tea house. My tea house was a lot nicer than this. My tea house sat up on a little bit of a hill in the middle of town, and it had a brick fence all the way around it. And inside were wooden tables and chairs. And in one corner was a great big tree that shaded everything. Well, anytime we went there, men went there all the time. I didn't go all the time, but once in a while I did, and Maureen usually went with me. There was a waitress, Khadija, bless her heart. She would shoo away whoever was under that tree and give us the table under the tree so we could be nice and cool. I just love Khadija. She's a neat person. And the tea they had, I don't know if you can quite see it, it might be small, but they served the tea in these big squat glasses. And it was a very strong, sweet tea. I don't know how else to describe it. It had cardamom in it, it had cinnamon in it, and lots of sugar. And that's what they survived on. They did have an Italian coffee and espresso that they could serve, but Somalis always drank this very sweet cardamom-laced tea. And they still do, I understand. It's just what they do. The schools and what we were doing there as a Peace Corps. That's us. That was my group. We were actually the 7th group of Peace Corps to go to Somalia. They're mostly guys. In the front row or two, you'll see some girls, but all the back were guys. And if you look at this picture, this is me over in the corner, and that's me there. Look at the picture, a couple things become pretty obvious, which were not obvious to us at the time. First, it is all lily white. You won't see a black person, you won't see a Chicano, you won't see an Asian, you won't see an Islander. All you see are lily white faces with big smiles. You'll also see that all the skirts on the girls are all exactly below the knee. Not an inch above, not anywhere else. We were a homogeneous group that represented the United States. I'd call us a middle class, verging on upper middle class, white group. And that was it. It distresses me now to see that picture. But at the time, that's what was expected of us, and that's what we did. There were also no homosexuals, no gays. If anyone was even suspected of being gay or lesbian, they were kicked out immediately. They were deselected, it was called. You weren't kicked out, you were deselected. Being a lesbian myself, I had to hide that fact from the Peace Corps, and there were times when it was real challenges to hide it. There was at least one other, a gay guy who was suspected, and even toward the end of the tour, he got sent home immediately upon being suspected. It's very much like the military. Gays were not allowed in the military, and they were not allowed in Peace Corps. We were to be this perfect little lily white group. This is like the school that I first taught at. It is not my original school. I don't have a picture of that, but it was very much like that. Just a basic little building in the middle of nowhere. And this is my school. Sheikh Awas School. We'll have a picture of the finished one in a minute. About a year before us, the group of construction guys had come over. Their job was to build schools and to teach Somalis how to build schools so that they could keep on building them after the construction guys left. And they built them all in bricks. They even made the bricks themselves. It was just an amazing task that they took on. And these were wonderful schools. And here's Bob Heinrich, who built our school. He's right here. And here's all of the Somali girls in my school. And up here is Sheikh Awas School. We had 4 rooms, and the little room at the end was the headmaster's office. No other schools had headmaster's offices, but our school did. This was really the Cadillac school of the entire region. It was well made. The students were incredible students. They had to pay to go to this school. School in Somalia was not free. So they had to come from fairly wealthy families in order to go to school. And when they went to school, there was a big expectation put on them that because of this investment that their family was making, that they would return that investment by becoming powerful people within Somali society and be a good influence for their tribe and their family. And this is Fatima. This is the woman who literally saved my life one night when I was coming home from night school. She had heard a rumor that there was a group of men who wanted to kill me, and no one believed her. She tried going to the police. She tried telling some of the other volunteers, and no one believed her. So she took it upon herself to escort me home, talking all the while in Somali about the big knife she had in her pocket. We had to walk across a big open field that had weeds in it about waist high. I walked that field almost every night coming home from night school, and the weeds were always very still. That night the weeds moved, and it scared the daylights out of me. But thank God Fatima was there, and I shall forever be grateful to her. Fatima was Bob's boyessa. He's the construction guy in our area. She took care of him, did the shopping, the cleaning, the cooking, taught him Somali. I mean, she did everything. Here's a meal that she cooked for him. It looks like there's a whole bunch of beef there and maybe some potatoes, and tomatoes, and perhaps a salad of some sort. I don't know where she got all these things. We didn't eat that well at all. We had spaghetti at night and eggs in the morning, and that was it. I mean, that was it. And I remember telling someone that I felt guilty eating the eggs in the morning because the chickens there looked more emaciated than I was, and they deserved more food than I did. But Fatima made sure that Bob ate well. Bless her heart, she was quite a woman. Here we are at school. I'm with 3 of the teachers here on the left and with one of my classes of students on the left. We shifted classes every 45 minutes like we do in most schools. This was a middle school, not a high school. The students here had to pass a test in order to get invited to the high school. And in the back, you can't see them, but about 10% of the students were girls. This was in the new school that Bob had built. This school technically held about 40 students, but there were typically in the neighborhood of, gosh, I don't know, 50, 60, 65 students in each room. They crammed 3 people into every desk that should have held 2. They leaned against the wall. They sat on the floor. They did whatever they could do to cram in as many students as they could. That many students wanted to go to school. And of course, the headmaster made more money when more students came to school. So they really did encourage everyone who wanted to come. And we had a big demand in our school because it was a good school. Peace Corps teachers had a great reputation. And so we had lots of students. The only one that compared to it at all was the Catholic orphanage. And those teachers too were excellent. The big difference being that the Catholic orphanage did not have a full-time English teacher, but Sheikh Awa's school had two, and that was a huge difference. These three boys were what I called the three musketeers of Sheikh Awa's school. They were bright, more than bright, they were brilliant students. I taught English from a teacher's manual that the government gave us. These boys knew more English than I could teach them. They were simply brilliant students, and they were respected by the other students, very much respected. They had that command about them that said they were leaders. I knew that they were going to become important in Somalia. When I met Abdi here in Ashland, he tried to track down these boys for me. And he tracked down one of them and found out that indeed he did become a minister of finance in the main government in Mogadishu. Said the other two boys he couldn't find at all. They were gone. And we speculated that they were probably killed during one of the many wars in Somalia that were absolute massacres. So tragic, because these boys were good boys and intelligent, sharp leadership. So I'm very, very sorry that we couldn't find them all. These are schools in other areas. On the left, that's my friend Tom Lederer. And his kids, you know, they're good kids and sharp kids, I'm sure, but not the quality of student that we had. They aren't wearing the same type of clothes. They don't have the same type of equipment. Over on the right is a school from the northern part of Somalia. And you can tell this from the northern part because they have books. We didn't have books. We had little binders, little notebooks. And I wrote the lesson on the blackboard each day, and the students copied it into their notebooks. And that's what we did for books. But for the most part, books were virtually non-existent. I did one project where I wrote to some libraries in the States and asked for books, and they sent us a whole bunch, and we did start a little library in Baidoa. And yes, there were girls. I'd say about 10% were girls. They were absolutely as sharp as the boys. Odds, however, were that they would not go as far in government as the boys. They could become teachers in the local school, but that was about all. They just did not have a future beyond that. Now in Somalia, it's quite different. Women are really taking a strong stand in the country. Some are even being elected to government offices. But that's taken, 50 years to come about. Back then, they were teachers only. But that was very respected. That could be said with pride. They were teachers. The agriculture guys, the ag guys. Jim Mikulski, the one in this picture, was in our group. His job was to locate villages where another group of agriculture guys could come in and teach Somalis better agriculture. I understand that this was at the request of the Somali government. And I love this one where he's showing the bushy woolly through the camera. I think the native probably thought it was a weapon of some sort. And when he looked through the camera, he found out it wasn't. If you look down here, you'll see his pillow right beside him. Before we came, the USAID demonstration farm was already there. It had its tractors and pesticides, and it had rule number 1, plant in rows. Here's one of the USAID men, Con Price, a very fine man, showing them how to use pesticides. This upsets me beyond measure. I was upset then and I didn't know why, and now I know why much better. They were teaching Somalis, of course, how to poison themselves with the pesticides. I don't think they would call it that. They thought they were doing a good job in helping them get bigger crops, but in fact, it was hurting them and probably still does. And working in rows really was not the Somali custom. On the left, you can see them as they were hoeing out weeds, and they just kind of went through as best they could. On the right, they are tilling a parcel of ground with a cow, not a truck. They didn't have tractors. They had a cow. A village was lucky if it had a cow, and that cow would be shared throughout the families. If they had two or more, all of those cows would be shared. Con Price, the guy on the right, was really a pretty decent guy. I didn't like what USAID was doing, but I liked Con Price. He and his wife, Sally, were wonderful people. They had us over for special meals and celebrations and took us out camping and everything. Well, one day, Con Price heard about this guy who claimed to be the greatest archer in all the region. He's over here on the left. That's old Peg Leg. You can see his peg leg sticking out here. When he took his bow and arrow out, he took his peg leg off and sat on it. Well, when Con heard about this, he said, well, okay, you great archer, let's go have a contest. So Con showed up with his, what I would call an Olympic worthy bow, and shot against this guy with a bow made from a local tree. Well, they set up a target way at the end of the alley, and everybody came to see this, everybody. They shot alternately, the Somali first, then Khan, then the Somali, then Khan. And they started out, the Somali shot first, and he hit the target, but not the center. Well, then Khan shot, and he hit right in the center. So they took the second shot. The Somali went, and he did better. He hit a little closer. But then Khan went, and he hit the center, dead center again. Son of a gun. The Somali took his third shot. He did pretty good. Well, then Khan took his shot and he missed the target. Now, that a man like this would miss the target is really pretty unlikely. But the crowd went nuts, just nuts. They were jumping and clapping and dancing and singing. I mean, just fabulous. Here it was possible that their guy was going to beat the American archer. Well, I was jumping up and down and having a great time too when one of the other volunteers who was there said, well, how would you like to be the wife to that guy? And I said, what? He said, don't you know that you're the prize in this contest? I said, no, didn't know. But that's what Khan had arranged. And at the time, I was really miffed. The nerve of this guy to put me up as the prize when he didn't even know who he was competing with. And yes, of course, Khan won, but he could have lost. And what would happen then? And I wanted to go over and slug Khan for doing it, really, but I didn't. I left the area before I slugged anybody to keep peace. But that was Khan Price. Bless his heart. Now we're into modern Somalia. What are Somalis now? Well, you have probably heard about Black Hawk Down. You may have seen the movie. This happened in 1993 in the Clinton administration, and don't worry, there's plenty of blame to go around to all the administrations. In Black Hawk Down, from a Somali point of view, this helicopter crashed in the middle of Mogadishu. These warriors stepped out and around. They were all in complete battle gear. They had repeating rifles that they were shooting, machine guns that went off. This was a battle, and Somalis didn't even know why. Were they upset? You bet. I'd be upset too. They started firing back. They got hold of one of the soldiers and drug him through the streets. Well, that happened to be an American soldier, although they didn't even know that at the time. This battle went on for several hours. Estimates of the number of Somalis killed ranges from a few dozen to a few thousand. Nobody really knows, nobody counted. This was a United Nations exercise to take out one lousy leader in Somalia. It could have been prevented. All they had to do was work with Somalis on the ground and say, look, this is what we want to do. What should we do, and will you help us? With that kind of help, if the helicopter had crashed, there would be Somalis on the ground who could step out and say, whoa, guys, no fighting. This is what we're here for. And there would have been no one killed and no danger. Fortunately, the Americans in the brigade finally decided they were beat, and they literally ran out of town. And Somalis formed a long alleyway for them to march out of, and they clapped as the Americans left. And I don't blame them. We were very unwelcome. We did a lousy job. We killed a lot of their people. And I personally am sorry for that event. Another thing you may have heard of are the pirates. This happened under the Bush and Obama administrations. Here's a pirate ship in the foreground. And look way in the back. There's one of the freighters. Now, what are the odds that this little boat could actually do any damage to that freighter? I'd say pretty much nil and none. This whole thing came about, and it could again have been prevented, but it came about because these freighters were going through Somali waters and dumping gunk into the waters and taking fish, good fish, out of Somali waters. Somalis don't have a navy. They still don't. So they went to other countries to ask for help. They went to the Arab countries and asked for help, and the Arab countries refused. They went to China to ask for help. China refused. They went to the United States to ask for help. The United States refused. They even went to the United Nations to ask for help, and the United Nations refused. All they wanted were a couple of boats to patrol the international line to keep these tankers, these invasive tankers, away from Somalia. And everyone refused. Somalis had no choice at that point. They had to turn into these pirate creatures and let it be known that they would not have these tankers dumping gunk into their waters and stealing their fish. And that's what they did. And of course, when the United States made the movie, they put sweet Tom Hanks in the role of the captain, and saying these awful Somalis went in and disrupted them and killed them and pirated their ships. Oh, nonsense. The Somalis were simply trying to protect their own waters. And it's hugely sad. It was so preventable. All they needed was a little help from someone, and no one would give it. Somalis are not brutal by nature. They are, as the Queen Hitchbutt said, a very kind and wonderful people. You may have seen them in the Olympics even. They have wonderful athletic ability. Our friend Abdi came here on an athletic scholarship. Many of them do, and they, particularly on our basketball teams and soccer teams, they're incredible athletes. You may have seen Shemaya Omar, an Olympic runner. They have that kind of build. They're tall and lean and beautiful people, like on runways. Iman was the first model from Somalia, and she gained a lot of attention. She's just a beautiful woman. There have been a number of them since. There's Yasmin Morsami, and more recently, Halima Aden. Beautiful, beautiful women. There are now more Somalis in the diaspora than there are in Somalia themselves. These people have gone all over the world. You'll see Somalis in here, of course. There's a big group in Minneapolis. There's a group up in Portland. There are groups elsewhere. And when they go places, they become part of that country. They become writers and poets and authors and painters and politicians, like Ilhan Omar. She is now in her second term as a US Congresswoman from Minnesota. The former president said, okay, Elmar, go home. Not likely. She says she is at home. She's an amazing young woman. She's one of this group of 7 or 9 young women coming up in the Congress who are just astounding young women. I know Somalia is trying to recover. They've been beset lately by famines that are absolutely unreal. And they're trying to build their country back into a beautiful country. These are pictures from northern Somalia. But with all of the divisions in the country, it's difficult. They're just not coordinated to make everything happen like they want it to happen. Somalia is not Somaliland, is not Puntland, is not Jubaland. They are different entities now. Most foreign nations will only look at Somalia itself. And when foreign aid comes in, Somalia gives it to the Somalis right in their country. Somaliland and Puntland certainly don't get any benefit from it. And it's a very sad situation. I was going to end this with a nice, bright, happy little poem. Then I got just a couple of days ago an article from this month's, actually February's National Geographic magazine, where they talked about the famine in Somalia. And I want to read just a bit of that article to you. And this is the position that they're in right now. Here we go. The sheep were the first to start dying. Unable to find enough grass to eat, they'd grown thin and listless, their bleats fading. They were just dying around us like something poisoned, Rahma said, pastoralist in the village of Haya, an area in Somalia. Lost 300 goats and sheep and 20 camels. Within 4 weeks of the drought in 2016, all of their animals had died. The town hired trucks to bring in water from other countries, from other cities, but mostly, she said, we felt thirsty. And unlike during the years of plenty when Rama was born into, they didn't name the bad years, hoping those times would be forgotten. The life we had before was like living in a castle, Rama said. We sold goats and had meat and butter. We didn't need anybody's help. We used to help others because we had too much. Somali pastoralists measure wealth not by what they can buy, but by the size of their herds. Losing your livestock is akin to having your house burned down, your car stolen, and your bank account emptied on the same day. In the village of Haya, the smell of death from thousands of rotting carcasses hung in the air. But for 3 months in 2016, as the drought deepened, Rahma's family held on. Families with surviving camels shared milk with those whose herds had died. As food dwindled, adults saved the largest portions for the youngest children. Diarrhea spread, Rahma says, and people feared for their lives. With all their animals now dead, the villagers pooled their money and rented a truck to take them to a displaced persons camp. And now roughly about 600,000 people live in those displaced persons camps in Somalia. Even having a year or two of rain just really doesn't help. To build a herd back up, to build their camels and sheep back up, to build their crops back up, it's going to take generations. If anyone can make it, Somalis can make it. They are a tough, resilient people. And truly, I do pray for them. Pray that they get back to that land that the Queen Hitzpah said was so wonderful, back to the land where they had all of their sheep and cattle. And with luck and with Allah's help, they will make it. Now, before I leave today, I want to give a bit of gratitude to some of the many people who sent me pictures and inspiration for this presentation. You won't recognize these names. They're from my Somali contacts, most of them volunteers. But if you want to learn more, you can go down to Bloomsbury and pick up my book called The Mystical Land of Myrrh. You'll find a lot more stories there and just learn more about Somalia. There are Kindle and audio versions of the book as well, and you can get that from my website or at Amazon and any other place where books and audios are sold. If you do go to my website, this is what it looks like. It has the picture of Arowello here, and across the menu at the top, over on the right-hand side, there's a link that says Somali Resources. Go to that link and you'll see all kinds of books you can buy that are about Somalia and by Somalis. And also my book, of course. So I hope you have enjoyed your virtual tour. I hope some of you will want to find out more about it.
Wonderful, Mary Ann, just wonderful. Maybe you could stop your screen share and give us the gallery view, and then I'll read you some of the questions from the chat box.
Let me stop sharing. Okay.
That was wonderful. And there's one very nice kudo for you in the chat box, which you should look at, from Barbara Partridge, about you know, the passion in your stories just says how much you enjoyed and respected and loved the Somali people. She called you a beautiful American as opposed to an ugly American.
Oh, bless her heart.
That's very good. But some of the other questions in here, Kay Aldridge was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya at about the same time, and she wanted to get more information about your living arrangements. Were you in a room or a cottage? Or we know you had you shared with Maureen and you had a Western potty, but
we had a real house. Omar Chicago had built this little house for the Peace Corps. Oh. It had 2 bedrooms, a bath, a little kitchen, a little dining room, and a little living room. It was probably around 600 square feet, but he had built it very specifically for us. It was pretty basic, cement floor. So he did bring in an American potty. Plus, sorry, he did bring that in.
Have you stayed in touch with Omar Chicago?
No, he read very little English, so I didn't even try to. We were not, how should I say, it wasn't a friendship with Omar as it was with some others. He was a father watching out for us. He adopted us as his daughters.
And how much did you learn any of the Somali language before, or how?
Incredibly little. Just, in fact, when I met Abdi, he's the Somali here in Ashland. He's the guy who's a coach out of the middle school. I heard him at a talk and he mentioned Baidoa. So I went up afterward and I said, Nabatmia. He stopped cold in his tracks. His eyes got real big and he turned around and looked at me, but he didn't say anything. So I said again, Nabatmia. And he broke into the biggest grin. That's the extent of my Somali, just about the extent. Broke into a big grin. He went off to the, assuming, of course, that I spoke Somali. But I really didn't. Somali is a very difficult language to speak. It's not Arabic. It's not Swahili. It's not any other language. It kind of sits out there on a branch by itself. It doesn't relate to anything else. It's just incredibly hard to learn. And because I was teaching in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 classes a week, I really did not have the time and energy to take classes myself in Somali. I wish I could have. I tried to at one point, and it was just so exhausting. I couldn't do it.
Well, how could you teach if you couldn't speak their language?
Aha. If I said, Nabatmia, and motion for you to repeat, would you repeat? Nabatmia.
Are you asking me to do that now?
Yeah.
Nabatmia.
Okay, you now know how to say hello. And we did that. We started out with very basic hello. It built up to this is my name, this is who I am, this is where I live, stand up, sit down, walk around. And we started very basic and we taught everything in English. and they learned incredibly quickly. Somalis spoke many languages before we got there. They spoke the 5 languages of Somali itself. They spoke Italian, they spoke Swahili, they spoke Arabic. Some spoke some English, had taken English classes before, so they were incredibly adept at languages, and they learned very quickly.
Did students come just from the town that you were in or from all over?
They came from what was called the Upper Juba region. We were the school for that region. It was a very wealthy region because of all the agriculture. That was the school for their region. So that's where they came from.
Did they have to pay for the school?
Yes, they did.
Because we've heard in other parts of Africa that all the schooling and the uniforms and everything was provided by the government. So
no, this was not. They did indeed. I'm going to put us into gallery view. No, that's not working because I'm not coming through. There I am, sort of. They paid for it themselves. Their families paid for it. In Abdi's case, his brother paid for it. His brother had become a policeman and he had the money to pay Abdi's tuition to go to a school. And they chose the Italian school for Abdi, so he attended there.
What was the money they gave? What kind of money?
I don't know. It was one of those questions I never asked.
So Kay, again, who I mentioned, was in the Peace Corps in Kenya. She mentioned that there were 3 gay people in her group in Kenya. They were pretty out within the PC group, but not with the authorities. So I don't know if you want to say anything more, Kay.
I'm sorry, there were 3 what?
3 gay people in her group
okay.
in Kenya.
There were 3 gay men. Our group was mostly men because it was an ag group.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, everybody in our group, all the volunteers knew that they were gay, but the authorities didn't know. And I don't think the Peace Corps director knew. And, you know, they were pretty discreet.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a thought on your observation, Marianne, that they were all whites. Well, we're talking about the 60s, and it's almost kind of like a luxury to be able to take 2 years off of your life and go and do this wonderful thing. How many Blacks could afford to do that?
That's true. I don't know how many applied. You've got a very good point there.
Yeah.
And then too, we had recruiters come to our college. And how many
Mhm.
recruiters went to a Black college?
Probably not.
Yeah.
What-
And about healthcare, hopefully you didn't need it, but if you had needed it, what was the
Oh,
healthcare
goodness,
like?
we did need it. Goodness, we needed it. We
Oh.
had malaria, we had dysentery, we had stuff we couldn't identify. We were desperately ill a number of times. There was a mission there, a Methodist mission, and they had 2 nurses. There was Con Price, I showed you, his wife Sally was a nurse, and she sometimes helped us. There was once when we couldn't get help from either of them, and we were absolutely desperate. Maureen was just burning up, and I didn't know what to do. So I asked Omar for his help, and he went to the Catholic mission to ask for Padre Victorio's help. And Padre Victorio went to the Russians. They had a camp outside of Baidoa where they trained the military, and they had a doctor attached there. He brought that Russian doctor into the mission. We took Maureen into the mission, and the doctor helped her there. It was so funny. As soon as the doctor saw that we were Americans who needed help, he tried to get back into the car to leave. He didn't want to touch us. He was afraid he would hurt us. But he did help us. She had a terrible case of malaria, very far advanced. He gave us some medicine that really helped. He said that the mosquitoes there had simply become immune to the quinine that we were taking. And he gave us a great big bottle of the good stuff that the Russians had developed. And we never had malaria again after that. But yeah, we were sick a lot. That and dysentery, oh my goodness, just yucky stuff.
What behaviors would somebody have to exhibit in order to be suspected of being gay? Would it be the way they talked? Would it be the way they dressed? Would it be the way they walk? What would it be? I know there's stereotypes in this country about that, and I'm just wondering what they were in
Yeah.
that area.
I think we're getting away from the topic of Somalia, and we only have another minute or two,
Thank
so.
you, Maria.
Yeah, and
Does
I wouldn't
anyone else-
know.
Does anyone else have any questions specific to Somalia?
Mm.
Marianne, you'll have to read the chat with all the thank yous and the kudos, and
Oh, okay.
thank you very much.
Oh, thank you all for coming.
That
I
was
do
a very
appreciate your being
impressive
here.
contribution you made. Thank you.
Thank-
That was great.
Very
Thank you.
Sharon,
Thank you.
great.
Yeah, thank you. And Maria, don't turn us off.
I'm not going to. I've
Okay.
covered up my leave button.
Okay.
Next week, everybody, it's David Drury, sure to be very, very fascinating, talking about Mali.
Cool. Thank you.
David Drury, some of you may have heard him before. He's also an excellent speaker. Yeah.
He's on the road a lot.
I can bring up the chat here.
Yeah, you've got to read all the wonderful kudos.
Well, there was a question about the language training. With the 5 different languages in Somalia, they taught us one of them, which happened to be a language that was not used in my region. So yeah, we got training, but no, it didn't do any good.
So I just wanted to double down on your comments on how wonderful it is on the Indian Ocean at sunrise. It's just really magnificent. My picture is from Zanzibar.
Oh, yes.
And I was there at a full moon also, so I got the sun and the moon rising. But it's just really a magical place.
It
Looking
is.
east on the Indian Ocean.
Yes. Oh, Zanzibar is just, I got there on my vacation. I took a tour of East Africa, and Zanzibar was one of the places I went to. And it too is just a magical place. It really is. And such a
Yeah.
contradiction in feelings there. That big Catholic church that is there that held the slaves, and all of the aromatic scents that just permeated the whole country is just absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the combination of frankincense and myrrh smells like. Can you describe it, or are they just their own scent, unable to be described?
I would say they are very, very sweet and
Okay.
very, very strong.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't know if I could differentiate between them, because I honestly don't know if I've had both of them at one time or not. I brought back this glump of resin, and I honestly don't know if it was frankincense or myrrh. People keep telling me different stuff. And when I sprinkle a little bit on, like I set it on a stove, on a saucer, and sprinkled a few drops on the saucer, I mean, it just fumigated the whole house. Very, very sweet and very strong.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Maybe stop recording, Marianne, so it'll start doing its thing.
Yeah, we have to wait a while so that it can turn into, hopefully, a recording. But all of you are welcome to leave. We would not feel offended.
My screen shows that you're still recording. Can you do stop record?
I did, I thought.
It's still blinking red
Pause
on my
recording.
screen.
Oh, my goodness. This is stop recording.